So what should you be using to save or invest inside of your emergency fund? That's what we're talking about today. Let's get moving forward. Hey everyone, welcome to the Plan Ranger, where our goal is to provide you with informed insights and a reasonable approach for managing your personal finances. So a few weeks back, we did a video covering the fundamentals of an emergency fund. And before we move on with how you should save or invest, let's just talk about real quick a couple key things that you're going to want to keep in mind as we proceed here. So your emergency fund are for things that are those unexpected expenditures. Where you want to be cautious is not to use your emergency fund for things that are planned, like, hey, I'm going to buy a new car. That's not an emergency fund type expenditure. That's not what you should use this for. It's for things like, hey, my water heater went out, I had a large medical bill, or in some cases, I lost my job. Though, if you watch that video, which you can go ahead and find the link for up above and also in the description down below, you want to keep in mind that the way we recommend shaping your emergency fund is to have an emergency fund for unexpected expenses, those large one-off things that you can't see coming, and then a control account for if you lose your job or if you want to leave your job. Keep in mind that the essence of the control account, and it's rightfully called that, is so that you can maintain control of your life and decide your employment and your income on your terms as much as possible. This can also be helpful as far as understanding how much should be in there. If you keep in mind, your emergency fund should probably be the greater of either your out-of-pocket max for your health insurance, or whatever the largest expense would be for your household or where you're living. Let's say on an unexpected basis. So something like your furnace going down would probably, for most people, be the largest expenditure that would not be covered possibly by a warranty. So in the emergency fund, we're probably talking somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000 is what you probably want to have there. And then the control account over here is where you'd have that kind of proverbial, that standard 3 to 6 months, 6 to 9 months, or maybe even 12 months, full year of your expenses set aside in case you want to leave your job or in case your job decides to leave you. So we've got these two accounts, or you can mix them all into one, whatever works best for you. But that's how you kind of calculate this and maybe the right way to approach it mentally, okay? So now the question becomes, how do we fund this? What should go inside of there? We touched on this a little bit in the basics, the fundamental videos of emergency funds, but I felt like it was worth going a little bit deeper into because there are some more options out there, but you also want to be very, very careful. I'm saying, how do you save or invest inside of there? There are some places I've seen where they're recommending using investments inside of your emergency fund. And I do think there's a place for that, but we need to kind of walk through how you go about doing that and when. Right off the bat, as you're starting your emergency fund and your control account, as you're beginning to fund these things, you just want to use cash. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second here, why cash. But for sure, when you're started, you just want to use cash till you get things going. Once you have probably your emergency fund at least set up that $10,000 to $15,000, then if you want to start looking a little bit beyond that, you could consider bringing in something like a CD ladder. A CD is a certificate of deposit. Bear in mind, I'm talking mainly for audiences here in the United States, Canada, where we have certificates of deposit. If you're not in the US or Canada, you might have something similar to this in your home country. You just want to look for it, but it's basically a bank deposit certificate. Usually, at least here in the US, they go for anywhere from 1 month all the way out to 4, 5, 6 years that you can do. They're usually FDIC insured if they're sold through a bank that offers FDIC insurance. So here in the US, you could use a CD ladder. What is that? A CD ladder is basically going to create kind of a staggered process. So CDs are issued with different time frames, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years or 24 months, 36 months, all the way out to 4 or 5 years sometimes. So what you can do is basically begin taking chunks of your money inside the emergency fund or your control account, and you can start to stagger them at different intervals. So let's say you've got $10,000 that you're going to spread out. In theory, if you wanted to, you could take, let's say $2,500 4 groups of 2,500 of that 10,000 and buy 4 different CDs. So you put 2,500 in a 3-month CD, you put 2,500 in a 6-month CD, 2,500 in a 1-year CD, and then 2,500 in a 24-month CD. And so what's happening is, as time is progressing, you're constantly having this rolling forward of CDs that are coming due that you roll back out. So when the 3-month CD comes due, you take it and you roll that one into, let's say, a 1-year or an 18-month or 24-month CD. And then, the 6-month would now only have 3 months left on it. The 12-month would now only have 9 months left on it. And so there's this kind of perpetual down, time frame laddering occurring, this motion of time that's pushing your CDs closer to maturity, that you basically just keep, taking them back, filling them and putting back, extending them back on a new term. So you always have a CD that's coming due or close to coming due. The reason you want to do that is because, let's say you took all the money, you just did a 5-year CD. That would probably offer you the highest rate of interest. The problem is that with CDs, if you surrender the CD before the time frame is up, before it matures, then in theory, you're going to be giving up that interest. You're going to surrender that interest. So the premise of this whole thing is to take something that really doesn't generate any income for you, any type of interest, or really even keep up with inflation, and try and find a safe way where it can generate some interest for you. Doing a CD ladder is a pretty good way of doing that. Again, first and foremost, you want to have, that emergency fund set up all cash. And then after that, if you want to take the control account or vice versa, and start doing a CD ladder, that would probably be okay. Now, once you have both of these things fully funded, and let's say that's your emergency fund set to go with, 15,000, 10 or 15,000, and your control account is set to go with, let's say, 6 months of expenses. If you wanted to pass that, continue to save and really bolster that control account and go, hey, I don't want to have 6 months, I want to have 12 months. What can I do now? And I've got my 401k taken care of, my 529s. If you're really checking all of your boxes, from a saving and investing standpoint to get where you want to go, then at that point, if you wanted to go beyond and start looking at investing a little bit inside of that emergency fund money, you could. And there's actually a pretty cool way to do that. One of my favorite things to do is to take people who have a very flush savings account, a very flush emergency fund. And bear in mind here, I'm also talking your 401k, your IRA, none of that's included in this emergency fund. This is just a standard non-qualified, or, it's not a qualified like an IRA or a 401k. This is just a standard bank or investment account held outside. You pay taxes on the interest and gains every single year. That's important. You can't do this really inside of a 401k or IRA, just so you know. But what you can do is you can take that money and you can put it into, or a portion of that, and put it into something like municipal bonds. Municipal bonds are bonds that are generally exempt from federal income tax, and depending on where you live and where the bond is issued, it could also be free from state and local tax too. So what you're doing here is you're taking part of your emergency fund, which essentially is going to sit there kind of stagnant, in some terms not doing much for you to grow. It's protecting you, it's just not helping you really grow. So what we're doing is we're taking a portion of that and we're putting it into a capacity where it can grow for you. Municipal bonds are bonds that are issued by states, municipalities. Sometimes they're offered by organizations, to, like, let's say, build a stadium or roads, or they're issued behind a project. But they basically allow you to invest money in a way that the coupon, the interest that you're being paid, is being paid essentially federal income tax free. So they're really nice in that aspect, and they, in some instances, can be kind of more conservative. But it's going to reduce your tax burden, and it's also going to be hopefully a little more conservative. And if you're going to do this, you probably want to go shorter term municipal bonds. You don't want to go out into longer term bonds, because that could expose you to a little more volatility and a little more risk, and so on and so forth. But what this allows you to do is start to earn some interest on this. Now, what's a fun strategy here is to take that tax-free interest that you're getting off those municipal bonds, take those and do them for some, use it to fund something like an IRA. So let's say you had $50,000 sitting there, just for the sake of simplicity here. You got $50,000 sitting in above and beyond your emergency fund, above and beyond your control account. You've just got an extra 50 grand sitting there in cash that maybe you inherited. You take that, you roll that into, again, a bond ladder instead of a CD ladder, like a bond ladder using municipal bonds, let's just say. And essentially you can take the interest that rolls off of that and use that interest just send it straight over to your IRA. Use that to fund your IRA. Use it to fund a 529 plan, where then you get more tax benefits. So now you're taking something that is very bland, very basic, like an emergency fund, and you're turning that top tier of it that, hey, I've already got this part here funded with cash and maybe CDs and a CD ladder, and now I can get a little more interesting. I can take this and put it in municipal bonds, get some tax-free income coming off of this, use that income to fund other things that benefit me from a tax aspect, like a 529 plan for my kids, or myself or whatever, or a IRA or a Roth or whatever that's going to continually benefit you. So you can use these things this way to do that. Now, let's talk real quick about one of the key things and conceptually here as to why you want to use cash at the ground level and why you don't want to use stocks or anything like that. One of the most inherent things when it comes to how you invest money is the premise of time frame. If you ever meet with a financial advisor that's going to invest money for you, one of the things they're invariably going to do is provide you with a risk questionnaire to figure out how risky your account should be that you're opening. One of the main drivers of how risky you are, on this questionnaire, what your results are, is going to be the time frame that you have in mind for the account. The further out in time you go, if you're 20, setting up an IRA, and you're not going to use it until you're 65 years old, chances are, regardless of how you answer any of the rest of those questions, it's going to tell you to be aggressive because you have so long to go. On the other hand, if you're 60 and you're setting up that same account, IRA, and you're going to retire in 5 years, it's probably going to tell you to be conservative, even if you're an aggressive, more aggressive from a behavioral standpoint. The reason for that is just because fundamentally, the closer you are to needing that money, the less exposure you want to have to volatility. If you're in stocks, which I've seen some people talk about, taking your emergency fund and investing in stocks. Personally, my personal view is that's probably not a great idea, because if you're in 2008 and all of a sudden the market collapses, the housing market collapses, or COVID or something like that, and the market collapses, now you stand the chance of having lost your job. And then in addition to that, that backup money that's supposed to be there to protect you, to cover your expenses, to cover repairs, things like that, the unforeseen, has now also cratered, 30, 40, 50%. And so now you're really stuck. So in general, because you don't know when an emergency is going to happen inherently, you almost have to assume that it could happen tomorrow. Hence, the closer you are to needing the money, the more conservative you want it. So if you told me, hey, I want to use this account in 3 months, how should I invest it? You shouldn't invest it. It should be in cash. Hey, I want to use this money in 10 years. Okay, well, now we can talk about investments. But realistically speaking, the closer you are to needing the money, the more conservative it needs to be, okay? Hence why we do the whole cash first, then laddering CDs, then maybe laddering some municipal bonds on top of that. You see, we start to build a structure here to these things that can, yes, provide some interest for your accounts, help you get at least a little bit of growth that might hold with inflation over time, but still provide that protection. So if an emergency happens, the first thing you probably do is go to that cash account, and then if it continues to go on an extended period of unemployment or something like that, you take those CDs as they roll off, and you wouldn't reinvest them, you just start pulling those out. Maybe you have to surrender some that are closer to maturity, and you lose a little bit of interest. And then you start going to the municipal bonds or something like that. So you have structure there where there's always fresh cash that's kind of coming in, working its way down the ladder in terms of risk and volatility that you can access without being penalized. Okay, we'll go ahead and just call it quits there. Hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully that helps provide some ideas as far as how you should or could save and invest inside of your emergency fund. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them down in the comments below. Click subscribe, join the Plan Ranger community. We'd love to have you. Like this video, and if you know anyone else that's working on their emergency fund, please share this video with them and help us help them. Until next time, thanks for taking the time. We hope this helped.